The grand hall of the Cyril dominion was filled with a golden glow. Tall pillars reached up like spears, and banners of the royal house hung down the walls. Soldiers stood in silence, their polished armor reflecting the light. At the center of it all sat Queen Erasha, calm and proud upon her crystal throne. Her eyes, sharp and unblinking, carried the weight of centuries of rule. It was not an ordinary day. For the first time in history, humans had been invited into the royal palace of Cyril. The galaxy had seen endless wars, but now both sides wished to talk of peace. The Queen's council stood beside her, whispering quietly about the risks of such a meeting. At last, the sound of boots echoed across the hall. The human delegation entered. Their uniforms were plain compared to the shining armor of the Cyril, but their steps were steady, and their faces showed no fear. Behind them marched guards, each one holding a weapon across the chest. Among those guards walked Terran. He was young, perhaps younger than most of his fellow soldiers, but his presence was steady. His dark hair was trimmed short, and his expression carried the simple seriousness of a man with duty. He kept his eyes forward, unaware that his face was about to change the course of history. The Queen's gaze swept across the group, as she had done 1,000 times before with diplomats and warriors. But then her eyes stopped. For a moment her breath caught in her chest. Her heart began to pound. The guard this human called Terran had a face she knew too well. The shape of his jaw, the line of his brow, even the faint scar near his lip, it was the same as Vorak, her former husband, the one she had cast away many years ago. The memory of Vorak rushed back to her mind like an old wound reopening. He had once stood beside her, promising loyalty and peace. But he had chosen ambition over love, betrayal over duty. He had vanished into the stars after the Great War, leaving behind scars on her heart and on her people. Yet here, in her hall, stood his image again. Erasha's fingers tightened around the armrest of her throne. Her counselors noticed her sudden stillness and leaned closer, whispering questions. But she gave no answer. She could not. For how could she explain this? The man before her was not Cyril. He was human. Still, the likeness was impossible to ignore. Terran, unaware of the Queen's shock, marched with discipline. He only thought of his orders: stand guard, protect the diplomats, remain silent. But he felt the heavy weight of the Queen's gaze fall upon him. Slowly, he risked a glance upward. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Something stirred inside him, though he could not explain it. The ceremony continued. The human leader, Commander Rin, bowed respectfully. "We come seeking peace, Queen Erasha," he said in a firm voice. "Our worlds have fought long enough. We wish to find common ground." The Queen nodded, though her thoughts were far from the words. She responded with the grace of a ruler, speaking of peace and the hope of a shared future. But her eyes returned, again and again, to the guard named Terran. Her counselors exchanged uneasy looks. They had never seen the Queen so distracted. To them, it appeared as if this young human held some hidden power. When the humans were guided to their seats, the Queen leaned slightly toward her closest advisor, Elder Malin. She whispered, "The young guard find his name." Malin bowed. "Yes, my Queen." The hours passed with speeches and promises. But to Erasha, they felt like whispers carried on the wind. All she could see was the shadow of Vorak standing in human form. Her mind raced with questions. Was it chance? A trick? Could Vorak have fled across the stars and left behind children among humans? Or was this nothing more than cruel coincidence? The Queen did not believe in simple chance. Not in matters like this. When the meeting ended, the humans were shown to their quarters within the palace walls. The guards returned to their stations, including Terran. The Queen remained in the hall, staring at the empty space where he had stood. Her heart was restless. She had buried her past long ago, but now it had returned in the most unexpected shape. As night fell over the Cyril capital, Erasha walked to her private chamber. Alone beneath the high windows of the palace, she whispered to herself, "Vorak, what game have the stars played now?" Far away, in his assigned quarters, Terran removed his helmet and sighed. The queen's eyes had unsettled him. Why had she looked at him so? He was only a guard, nothing more. Yet in her gaze, he had felt the weight of something ancient, something heavy with meaning. And so the first thread was woven between a queen haunted by the face of her past, and a human guard unaware that he carried a mystery that could shake two civilizations. The story of peace, betrayal, and destiny had only begun. The palace of the Cyril Dominion was quiet that night. The golden halls were lit by dim crystal lamps, and guards stood still at every corner. Queen Erasha walked slowly through the long corridor, her mind heavy with thoughts. The image of the human guard, Terran, would not leave her. His face was like a ghost from her past, a mirror of Vorak, the one she had once loved and hated in equal measure. She stopped before a tall window, looking out at the endless stars. Her reflection in the glass showed her calm face, but inside her heart was restless. "Why him?" she whispered softly. "Why now?" Her advisor, Elder Malin, approached quietly. He bowed before speaking. "My queen, I have learned the human guard's name. He is called Terran, from a small farming colony in the human outer systems. His records show no special rank or noble family. He joined their defense forces only a few years ago." Erasha's eyes narrowed. "No noble family, no claim of power, yet he carries a face I know too well. Do you believe in chance, Malin?" The old advisor shook his head. "Not in such matters, my queen. Faces may resemble by accident, but this is more. Perhaps the stars are testing you." Erasha said nothing, but her mind traveled back many years. She remembered the days before the war, when she had stood beside Vorak. He was charming, bold, and filled with vision. He had spoken of unity, of leading the Cyril to greatness. For a time, she believed in him. She had even chosen him as her consort, against the warnings of her council. But then came betrayal. Vorak had gathered power in secret, forming deals with enemies, preparing to take the throne for himself. When the truth was revealed, war broke out. The Dominion nearly fell into ruin. In the chaos, Vorak vanished. Some said he was killed in battle, others whispered that he fled beyond the edge of known space. Erasha had forced herself to bury the memory, to move forward as a ruler must. And now, after so many years, here was Terran. A human, but bearing Vorak's likeness so strongly that it pierced her heart. The queen turned away from the window. "Watch him," she ordered. "Do not let him suspect, but I must know who he truly is." Meanwhile, Terran rested in the simple quarters given to the human guards. He sat on the edge of his bed, polishing his weapon slowly. His thoughts were not on the mission, nor on his fellow soldiers. They were on the queen. He remembered how she had looked at him in the hall. It was not the cold stare of a ruler, nor the distant gaze of a monarch. It was different, heavy, as if she saw something in him that he himself did not understand. "Why did she look at me like that?" he muttered under his breath. His friend, a fellow guard named Kalen, chuckled. "You're imagining things, Terran. The queen doesn't notice soldiers like us. She's a ruler of stars. We're just shadows in her hall." But Terran shook his head. "No. She saw me. I could feel it." Kalen waved him off, but Terran's unease grew. He did not know it, but he had already become the center of attention in ways far greater than he imagined. The next day, during the second round of peace talks, the hall was filled once again. Humans and Cyril spoke of trade, security, and shared borders. The words were polite, but the tension beneath them was clear. Neither side fully trusted the other. Erasha listened, but her eyes strayed once more to Terran, who stood silently near the human diplomats. Each movement of his hand, each turn of his head, echoed with the memory of Vorak. At one point, she leaned toward Elder Malin and whispered, "Bring him to me." Alone. Malin nodded, and later that day, when the talks were done, a message was quietly passed to Terran. He was ordered to present himself before the Queen, under the reason of special duty. Confused but obedient, Terran followed the palace guards through twisting corridors until he stood before tall silver doors. When they opened, he stepped into a private chamber lit by soft blue light. Queen Erasha stood by a table of crystal, her long robe flowing around her. She dismissed the attendants with a gesture. Now it was only the two of them. Terran bowed awkwardly, unsure of the proper custom. "My queen," he said. Erasha studied him in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke softly, "You carry a face that should not belong to you." Terran frowned. "I don't understand." "You resemble someone I once knew," she continued. "Too closely. Tell me, human, where do you come from? Who are your parents?" Terran shifted uncomfortably. "I was born on the farming world of Arlen. My parents were simple folk. They worked the land until they passed away. I have no great bloodline, no hidden story. I am only a soldier." But Erasha's eyes searched his face, as if reading more than his words. His voice, his posture, even the way he frowned, all were reminders of Vorak. The Queen's heart told her this was not chance. She did not yet know how, but Terran was connected to her past. "Perhaps you are more than you believe," she said quietly. "Perhaps the stars have placed you here for a reason." Terran stared at her, confused and troubled. He felt as if he had stepped into a mystery far larger than himself. And as he left the chamber, one thought would not leave his mind: why does the Queen look at me as if she knows me? The morning sun rose over the Cyril capital, its light spilling across shining towers and crystal bridges. Inside the palace, Queen Erasha prepared herself for another day of delicate talks. Yet her thoughts were not on treaties or trade. They circled again and again around a young human guard named Terran. She had spoken to him briefly the night before. His answers had been plain, his life story ordinary. But his face, his voice, his manner, none of it felt ordinary. Every detail echoed the memory of Vorak. It was as if the stars themselves had placed the soldier in her path. Erasha could not ignore it. She needed to know the truth. That morning, she called Elder Malin to her side. "Bring him again," she said firmly. "But this time, I will test him." Malin bowed. "As you command, my queen." Later that day, as the human delegation rested between meetings, Terran received another summons. His fellow guards whispered behind his back. Some laughed and said he must have caught the Queen's eye. Others warned him to be careful. Terran himself felt uneasy. The Queen's gaze haunted him, heavy and sharp, as though she saw more than he wished to show. Still, he obeyed. He was led into a private garden inside the palace walls. The air was filled with the scent of silver leaf trees and glowing flowers. Birds with bright feathers flew above the fountains. At the center of the garden stood Queen Erasha. She turned as he approached. "You are here," she said. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were searching. Terran bowed. "Yes, my queen." She studied him in silence for a long time before speaking again. "Tell me, Terran of Arlen. What do you believe makes a soldier strong? Is it blood? Is it training? Or is it something else?" Terran hesitated. "I think, a soldier is strong because of what he chooses. Not where he is born, not who his parents are. It is choice that makes strength." Erasha's eyes narrowed slightly. The answer reminded her of Vorak, who had once spoken of choice and destiny. Yet there was a difference in Terran's voice, less ambition, more honesty. She stepped closer. And what would you choose, if given power? To rule? To fight? To protect? Terran straightened. To protect. That is why I serve. Erasha turned away, hiding the flicker of emotion on her face. Interesting, she whispered. While she questioned him, her scientists worked quietly behind the scenes. On her orders, they had already studied the humans' records. Now they prepared to gather more proof. When Terran was guided back to his post, he did not notice the tiny scanner that brushed against his arm. To him, it was just a guard checking armor. To the scientists, it was the key to his blood. That night, in hidden chambers beneath the palace, the results came. Elder Malin brought them to the queen. My queen, he said, lowering his voice, the test is complete. The human's blood carries strange markers. They are not fully sterile, but there are patterns, old noble patterns. They match your former consort's line. Erasha's breath caught. So it is true. Malin nodded. Not exact, not pure. But close enough. This human carries traces of sterile nobility in his veins. If Vorak fled and mixed his line with other people, this one could be his descendant. Erasha's hand tightened on the scroll. A storm of emotions raged inside her: anger, sorrow, disbelief, and curiosity. Vorak's betrayal had scarred her deeply. To see his bloodline living on in a human soldier felt like an insult, and yet also a strange gift from fate. She whispered, what should I do with him? Malin bowed his head. That is for you to decide. He is human, yet he carries sterile blood. Perhaps he can be a bridge between our peoples. Or perhaps he is a danger. The queen dismissed him, but she could not sleep. She sat by the window, watching the stars, her mind caught between past and present. The next day, Erasha summoned Terran once more. This time, she spoke directly, her voice sharp like a blade. You are not ordinary, Terran, she said. Your blood carries secrets. I do not yet know what they mean, but you must understand your presence here is not chance. It is fate. Terran stiffened. My queen, I don't understand. I told you I am only a soldier. Perhaps, Erasha replied. But perhaps you are more. Her eyes locked onto his. Would you be willing to face the truth, if it were given to you? Even if it changed everything you thought you knew. Terran's hands curled into fists at his sides. His voice was steady, but there was fear beneath it. If the truth is mine, I will face it. But I will not be judged by the past of others. I am myself. The queen was silent for a long time. His words echoed in her mind. Not judged by the past. It was something Vorak would never have said. Finally, she nodded. Very well. We will see what the stars decide. Terran left the chamber with confusion burning in his heart. The queen's words troubled him. What truth lay hidden in his blood? Why did she look at him as though he carried a history he did not know? He walked back to his station, unaware that the knowledge of his bloodline was already stirring quiet whispers in the palace. Some sterile nobles had learned of the results, and their faces carried both fear and suspicion. The queen had begun her test, but the true trials were yet to come. The palace of the sterile dominion was heavy with silence. Though the human and sterile diplomats met daily to discuss peace, a hidden storm was growing behind the golden walls. That storm centered on one man, Terran, the human guard who bore the face of a ghost from the queen's past. Queen Erasha had already seen proof from her scientists. Terran's blood carried traces of sterile nobility, marks that should not exist in any human. To her, the truth was clear: he was linked to Vorak, her former consort, the man who had betrayed her people long ago. But how could she reveal this? How could she admit to her council that the blood of a traitor now lived inside a human soldier? The queen sat in her private chamber, staring at the glowing scroll of results. Her advisor, Elder Malin, stood quietly nearby. "You cannot keep this hidden forever, my queen," Malin said. "The council whispers already. Some nobles suspect you are protecting this human. They want answers." Erasha closed her eyes. "If I reveal the truth too soon, they will demand his exile, or worse. But if I say nothing, suspicion will only grow. Either way, the humans will not forgive us if harm comes to one of their guards." Malin bowed his head. "Then perhaps the guard himself must hear the truth first." The queen's fingers tightened around the scroll. She knew he was right. That evening, Terran was summoned once again. He followed the guards through the endless corridors until he entered a chamber lit only by soft crystal flames. At the center stood Queen Erasha, her posture straight but her eyes shadowed with doubt. Terran bowed respectfully. "You called for me, my queen." "Yes," Erasha said quietly. "Because you deserve the truth." He frowned. "The truth?" She stepped closer, her eyes searching his face as if she might read the answer there. "You carry blood that does not belong to humans. My scientists tested it. You are part Cyril. The patterns are clear." Terran froze. For a moment he could not speak. Then he laughed nervously. "That's not possible. I was born on a farm. My parents were simple people. They were human." Erasha's voice was calm, but heavy with certainty. "Perhaps they believed so. Or perhaps they did not know. But your blood does not lie. You share the same noble line as one who once ruled beside me." Her words struck him like a blow. His chest tightened. "You mean? I'm not human." "You are human," Erasha said firmly. "But not only human. There is more in you. A past you did not choose, but one that lives in your veins." Terran shook his head. "No, I am only myself. I cannot be judged by blood I did not ask for." His words echoed through the chamber. For a moment, Erasha felt the weight of memory. Vorak would have grasped at such a truth, used it as power. But Terran rejected it, choosing his own identity. Her heart softened slightly. "Perhaps you are right. But you must understand why this truth is dangerous. To the Cyril, the name of Vorak is cursed. If they see his likeness in you, if they know his blood flows in you, they may call you enemy." Terran stared at her in shock. "Vorak, was he the one I look like?" Erasha's lips tightened. "He was my former consort. Long ago, he betrayed us. And when I saw you, I saw his face return to me. At first I thought it was a cruel trick of fate." Terran's chest burned with unease. "So you think I am like him?" The queen shook her head. "No. You speak with honesty where he spoke with hunger. But others may not see this difference. Already, my council begins to whisper." The next day, rumors spread like wildfire. Some Cyril nobles whispered that the queen was protecting a human spy. Others claimed Terran was an experiment, made to mimic Cyril blood. A few even believed he was Vorak reborn, returned from the void to reclaim power. The humans noticed the strange stares and quiet tension. Commander Rin confronted Terran directly. "What did you do?" the commander asked in a low voice. "The queen looks at you as if you carry some secret. The Cyril Council is restless. Tell me, Terran, what have you hidden from us?" Terran's jaw tightened. "I don't know. I told her everything I know about myself. But she says my blood carries something more. Something not human." Rin's eyes widened in shock. "Not human? Then we are already in danger. If they think you are one of them, or tied to some old wound, they might use you as a weapon against us." Terran lowered his head. "I never asked for this. I only wanted to serve." That night, the council gathered. Nobles argued fiercely. Some demanded that Terran be removed at once. Others feared harming him would break the fragile peace with humans. Queen Arasha listened in silence until the chamber grew still. Then she rose and spoke with steady voice. This human is not a spy. He is not an enemy. He is proof of something greater, that our peoples are more connected than we believed. His blood carries both lines. He is neither wholly human nor wholly sterile. He is both. And that is why we must not fear him. Her words silenced the room, but not their doubts. The council bowed, yet suspicion still lingered in their eyes. When the meeting ended, Arasha returned to her chamber. She looked out at the stars and whispered to herself, "Vorak, your shadow still follows me. But this boy, he is not you." And somewhere in the palace, Terran lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His whole life had changed in a single day. He was no longer just a guard. He was a bridge between two worlds, whether he wished it or not. The revelation had been made, but its consequences had only begun. The days that followed were uneasy in the Cyril capital. The peace talks continued, but the air in the palace was filled with suspicion. Cyril nobles whispered that the queen had grown too close to a human guard. Human officers worried that their host might be hiding secrets. And in the middle of it all stood Terran, carrying a truth he had not asked for. He now knew his blood carried both human and Cyril lines, though he still felt nothing but human in his heart. To the queen, he was proof of connection. To the nobles, he was a danger. To his fellow humans, he was a question they did not know how to answer. Queen Arasha tried to hold everything together. She stood in the council chamber, speaking of trust and alliance, but even as she spoke, her thoughts were far away. She felt the storm building, and not only among her own people. One night, as the council argued over Terran's presence, a messenger rushed into the chamber, his face pale. "My queen," he cried. "The Zorik swarm has entered the system." The chamber fell silent. The Zorik were no ordinary enemy. They were a ruthless species, moving like a tide across the stars, consuming every world in their path. For centuries, Cyril and humans had both fought against them separately. Now, the swarm had come to the very heart of the Dominion. Arasha rose from her throne. "Summon the fleet," she commanded. "Warn the humans. We must stand together, or we will both fall." The palace exploded into action. Soldiers armed themselves, diplomats hurried to safe quarters, and commanders rushed to the war rooms. Human and Cyril officers stood side by side for the first time, their arguments forgotten in the face of survival. Terran felt his heart pound as he tightened his armor. For the first time, his duty as a guard was no longer ceremonial, it was war. From the palace towers, he could see the dark shapes of the Zorik ships entering orbit. They looked like giant insects of metal, wings stretched wide, glowing with strange light. The Cyril fleet rose to meet them, shining like silver spears. Human warships joined in, their engines blazing blue. The sky above the capital turned into fire. Inside the palace, chaos spread. A group of Zorik dropships broke past the fleet and slammed into the city streets. Swarms of insect-like soldiers poured out, their claws tearing through stone, their shrieks echoing through the night. The palace shook as alarms blared. Guards rushed to defend the gates, but the Zorik pressed forward with terrible speed. Terran gripped his weapon tightly. His commander, Rin, shouted over the noise, "Protect the diplomats. Do not let the swarm reach them." "Yes, sir." Terran answered, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. The battle spilled into the outer halls. Cyril warriors fought with crystal blades, humans with rifles, but the Zorik numbers seemed endless. Terran found himself at the front, holding a narrow passage with only two others. The creatures charged, their claws striking sparks against his armor. He fought with every ounce of strength, his training guiding his hands. A Cyril warrior fell beside him, wounded. Without hesitation, Terran pulled the soldier back and shielded him, striking down another Zorik in the process. Arasha, watching from a higher balcony, saw it all. Her eyes widened. Terran did not fight for glory or power, he fought to protect, even those not of his own kind. He reminded her of Vorak's strength, yes, but not of his ambition. There was no hunger for power in this young soldier. Only loyalty. Only courage. As the fighting raged, a group of Zorik broke through a side gate, heading straight for the chamber where the humans were sheltered. The guards struggled to hold them back. "Fall back," one shouted. "We can't stop them." But Terran heard their cries and turned immediately. Against orders, he rushed toward the danger. His boots pounded the floor as he charged into the hall just as the Zorik burst through. The creatures rushed forward, towering over him, but Terran stood his ground. He raised his weapon and fired again and again. When his rifle ran dry, he drew his blade and fought hand to hand, refusing to retreat. His roar of defiance filled the hall as he struck the last creature down. The human diplomats stared in shock at their young guard, panting, his armor scarred, but his eyes steady. "You are safe," Terran said simply, before collapsing to one knee. By dawn, the first wave of the Zorik attack had been repelled. Smoke rose over the city, and the dead were carried with honor. But the capital still stood. Humans and Cyril had fought side by side, and for the first time, trust had been born in fire. Queen Arasha looked out over the battlefield from her balcony. Her people were alive because of courage like Terran's. She whispered to herself, "He is not Vorak. He is something more." But not all saw him that way. In the council chamber, some nobles spoke in fear. "The boy carries Cyril blood," one hissed. "He will claim power. He will divide us. Look at how the queen watches him." Another added, "He is dangerous. If we let him live among us, he could turn both humans and Cyril against the throne." The queen listened, her jaw tight. She could silence them with a single word, but she knew their fear was not easily erased. And so the question grew louder in her heart, should she exile Terran for the sake of peace? Or should she protect him, knowing he could be the key to saving both their peoples? The Zorik would return, stronger than before. And soon, both humans and Cyril would need more than soldiers. They would need unity. And perhaps, that unity could come from the one person both sides distrusted most. The city of the Cyril capital still carried the scars of battle. Smoke drifted above broken towers, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the streets. Yet, despite the damage, the people still stood. The Zorik swarm had been pushed back for now. In the great hall of the palace, Queen Arasha sat with her council. Around her, nobles argued fiercely. Some demanded that Terran be removed at once. Others warned that exiling him could break the fragile trust between humans and Cyril. "He is a danger," one noble shouted. "Did you not see how he fought? He has the strength of a Cyril noble, yet he is human. He could rise against us." Another countered, "Without him, the diplomats would have fallen. Without him, the palace might already be ash. Should we cast out the one who saved us?" The voices grew louder, but Arasha remained silent. Her eyes were fixed on the memory of Terran standing alone in that narrow passage, holding back the Zorik with nothing but his will. That image burned in her mind, stronger than all the council's words. At last, she raised her hand, and the chamber fell quiet. "I will speak with him myself," she declared. Terran stood in the palace courtyard, watching the sun rise. His armor was scratched, his body aching, but his spirit was steady. He had fought not for glory, but because it was his duty. Yet he felt the weight of the whispers around him. Cyril guards watched him with suspicion. Even some of his human comrades looked at him differently now. When Queen Arasha approached, the soldiers stepped aside. Terran bowed, but the queen lifted her hand. "You need not bow, not today," she said softly. She studied him in silence, then asked, "Why did you rush into danger, when others told you to fall back?" Terran answered without hesitation. "Because lives were at risk. If I had turned away, they would have been lost. A soldier protects. That is all." Arash's eyes softened. His words were simple, yet they carried truth. She remembered how Vorak had once spoken of power, of ruling, of bending destiny to his will. But Terran was different. His strength came not from ambition, but from choice. Still, the queen knew the danger. If she defended him, her council might turn against her. If she abandoned him, humans might lose faith in the talks. She drew a deep breath. "Terran, you carry blood that is both human and Cyril. Some call that a curse. I wonder if it is a gift. You may be the bridge that unites us. But I must know, will you stand for both our peoples, not just your own?" Terran met her gaze. "I will. I fight not for bloodlines, but for peace. If my life can protect both humans and Cyril, then that is the path I choose." His answer stirred something in her heart. For the first time, she believed the stars had not placed him here by accident. That same day, a message arrived from the outer system. Scouts reported that the Zorik swarm was regrouping. Their forces were larger than before, and soon they would strike again. The council gathered in alarm. Some nobles shouted for the humans to defend themselves. Others demanded the Cyril fleet withdraw to protect their own worlds. The fragile peace threatened to shatter in panic. But then Arash arose. "We will not divide," she said firmly. "We will fight as one. And I know who will lead the mission." The council turned, shocked, as her eyes fell on Terran. "He will lead a strike team into the heart of the swarm," Arasha declared. "Only by destroying their command ship can we weaken them before they reach us again. He has already proven his courage. Let him prove it once more." The chamber erupted in voices. Some called it madness. Others saw it as wisdom. The human commander, Rin, stepped forward, his face stern. "He is only a guard," Rin argued. "This is no task for one man." Arash's voice was unshaken. "He will not go alone. Cyril and human soldiers will join him. But he must lead. He is the bond between us. If this alliance is to survive, it must be tested in fire." That night, Arasha met Terran in the war room. Maps of the swarm fleet glowed before them. She explained the mission, how they would strike fast, deep into enemy lines, and destroy the command vessel. Terran listened carefully. When she finished, he simply nodded. "I will do it." "Do you not fear?" Arasha asked softly. "I do," Terran admitted. "But fear is natural. What matters is what we do in spite of it." The queen looked at him with quiet pride. "Then may the stars guide you, Terran of two bloods. You carry more than weapons into this fight. You carry the hope of peace." When Terran left the chamber, he felt the weight of her words on his shoulders. He was no longer just a guard. He was a leader now, chosen by both fate and the queen. As he prepared his armor for the mission, his comrades gathered around him. Some were doubtful, some uncertain, but many looked at him with new respect. He raised his head and said simply, "We fight not as humans or Cyril. We fight as one. Together, we will show the swarm that we are not afraid." The soldiers answered with firm voices. And so, as the stars above burned bright, the choice had been made. Terran would lead them into the fire of battle not as a soldier of one people, but as a bridge between two. The void of space stretched endlessly before Terran and his strike team. The small fleet of human and Cyril ships moved like silent shadows toward the heart of the Zorik swarm. Their mission was dangerous, perhaps deadly, but the young guard who carried two bloodlines led them with steady resolve. Terran stood on the bridge of the lead ship, looking at the maps of enemy formations glowing before him. His mind was calm, though his heart beat like a drum. He thought of Queen Erasha, of her faith in him, and of the people who relied on his courage. This is not just a battle, he whispered to himself. It is a choice. To protect, to unite, to survive. The swarm's command ship loomed ahead like a dark fortress. Its hull pulsed with strange energy, and smaller fighter ships swarmed around it like hornets around a hive. The fleet tensed, waiting for Terran's order. Steady, he said, gripping the controls. We go in as one. Human and Cyril. We strike together, and we strike fast. The ships surged forward. The first wave of Zorak fighters shot toward them with deadly speed. Terran's team dodged and fired, weaving through the chaos. Explosions lit the darkness, shaking the lead ship, but Terran remained focused. He gave precise commands, directing human and Cyril pilots with confidence. Flank the left wing, he shouted. Push through the outer hull. Inside the enemy command ship, alarms blared. The Zorak leader, a towering creature of metal and claw, sensed the attack and sent more forces to defend its vessel. Terran led the boarding party, moving from ship to ship until they were close enough to breach the hull. With Cyril blades and human rifles, they entered the heart of the enemy fortress. The corridors were dark and twisted, filled with alien shrieks. Terran felt the weight of every step. He knew that failure here would mean not only death for them but doom for the Cyril capital. But he did not falter. He pressed forward, guiding his team with careful precision. Stick together, he commanded. Focus on the command core. Nothing else matters. They reached the central chamber. The Zorak leader stood waiting, its claws sharp and glinting. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence. Terran stepped forward. We are not afraid, he said firmly. We fight for life, not destruction. The battle was fierce. Blades clashed, rifles fired, and sparks flew in every direction. Terran fought with skill and courage, protecting his team while striking at the enemy. Every move he made was calculated, every decision deliberate. Finally, he reached the command core. With a precise strike, he destroyed the control center, causing the ship to shake violently. The Zorak leader roared in frustration as its forces faltered. Terran signaled the fleet. The humans and Cyril outside pressed their advantage. One by one, the enemy ships fell. The swarm, once a terrifying tide, began to retreat. When the battle ended, silence fell across the fleet. Smoke and debris floated in the void, but the Allied ships were intact. Terran's team returned to the Cyril capital as heroes. On the palace balcony, Queen Erasha watched the fleet's return. Relief washed over her. The young guard had not only survived but had led them to victory. When Terran stepped forward to greet her, his armor scratched and his face tired, the queen smiled. You have done more than I could have imagined, she said softly. You carried courage, skill, and honor. Not just in battle, but in your heart. Terran bowed, humbled. I only did what was right, my queen. I only did what I could to protect both our peoples. Erasha placed a hand on his shoulder. You are not just a soldier, Terran. You are a bridge. Between humans and Cyril, between past and future. You have shown us that courage is stronger than fear, and unity stronger than doubt. In the days that followed, Terran's actions became legend. Humans and Cyril alike spoke of the guard who bore two bloodlines and fought for peace. Even the nobles who had doubted him began to see that his courage and loyalty were unmatched. Terran himself remained humble. He continued to serve, not for power, not for glory, but because it was his duty. And wherever he went, he carried a quiet reminder that the stars sometimes chose unexpected heroes. Queen Erasha, watching him train new soldiers, reflected on the journey that had begun when she first saw his face. The resemblance to Vorak had stirred memories, fears, and doubts. But Terran was not Vorak. He was something new, a symbol of hope, a living proof that the past did not have to dictate the future. The galaxy was vast, filled with danger and uncertainty. But for the first time in many cycles, the people of the Seral Dominion and their human allies looked to the stars with hope. And in that hope, Terran stood at the center, a young guard who had faced destiny and chosen courage over fear. The stars had placed him here, perhaps by chance, perhaps by fate. But whatever the reason, one thing was certain: the galaxy would remember the day the young human guard, with a face from the past, became the protector of the future. And so, in the golden halls of the palace, under the light of countless stars, peace began to take root stronger than ever, built on courage, unity, and the legacy of one brave guard.